Hey guys, welcome back to Common Mansplaining. This is Eddie, and that's Christian. And we got a quick one for you, what I think is going to be a relatively fast one. Christian's going to try to sell me on tariffs. Tariffs, as you know, is Donald Trump's his new favorite word, and he's been, he's been piling on all the gusto about how great tariffs are going to be and how they're going to fix every problem in the universe, and it's all we need to know. Basically, his entire financial plan is tariffs, 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 and then everything is better. Now, I'll start by giving my impression as to what effect I believe tariffs will have. I think that there will be some positive and some negative effects. I think the positive effects that it'll have is it will encourage strong trade renegotiations. I think that is probably the best thing that it will do. It'll give us a lot of edge with countries like China, who to this point have been basically raking us over the coals in a lot of our deals. I think that the biggest problem I can foresee on the other side of this equation is that right now we're just coming off a situation where inflation is very high, where the products that we buy, the consumer price index is pretty rough. Our ability to purchase as a consumer, as just your everyday Joe Schmo, is not very good. And I think tariffs are more of a long-term solution to good economy as opposed to a short-term solution. And so I think what will likely happen is, for the short term, we'll actually see additional price increases, additional blowback at a time that we can't handle it. I think right now we're going to run into, because obviously the short answer is, right, let's say we tariff a product, and then, there's only two options: either a renegotiation, which is going to take time, or they're just going to pull it off the market for the short term and force it to become a domestic product, which is going to be the faster and which I think is what we're going for.
Long term.
Right. But either way, meanwhile,
it does happen.
Meanwhile, we're either going to buy a product from a different source who's more expensive, because the reason we were getting it from China in the first place is because they're paying their kids $2 a day to make the stuff in the first place, right? And then, for the short term, we're going to buy it at a more expensive price, or we're going to manufacture it here for a more expensive price where it's already being done. Either way, right? At the time where we're hurting the most, and we're already begging to find a new president to kind of give us some relief in that arena, it's going to be like, guess what? We're going to solve your problems by making everything cost twice as much, So tell me what your thoughts are on it.
Well, first, thanks for that. There is a third option.
Okay.
We can consume less.
Yeah.
When you look at the economic model, when prices go up, we don't just have to
keep on buying, right?
Right. So, in fact, pretty predictably, we consume less. There are very few static things that we buy, regardless sort of a price. Right. And those are the people, they have monopolies, and that's the sort of oil, which is gasoline, is sort of had inelastic markets they talk about. But for the monetary, if it's furniture, if it's certain technologies and things like that, right? We won't upgrade our phone every year. Maybe we need to make our phones last a few years, things like that. So consumption will go down.
Yeah.
And then it's
which it already has to an extent.
To an extent. Now, that's another option. Right? There's the higher cost, but demand is not a constant.
Sure.
Demand can fluctuate, and especially and it fluctuates very strongly based on higher prices. So yeah, in general, the philosophy which was pushed by Republicans or conservative free market is for free markets.
Mm-hmm.
That free markets generally bring about more peaceful relations with our neighbors.
Sure.
They bring about generally a better, higher quality of life, lower cost of goods, so we can have nicer things and pay less for them. They can be more widely experienced by the populace, right? But as with everything, if you can underuse a tool and you can overuse a tool. So I wouldn't say that tariffs are good per se, like always a good thing.
Right.
It is something that has to be wielded in wisdom.
Right.
And this goes back to one of, I think, Trump's important roles, is that of being a disruptor. right? That every once in a while you have things that even when party affiliations fit, the certain administrations or even over long administrations keep up certain policies, and sometimes that's good. It was like we're going to fight against China or against communism,
right.
USSR, Russian communism, regardless of the party.
Right.
Right. Some Republicans were obviously better at it,
right.
but the Democrats didn't like completely drop the ball or like turn the corner on policy. So what happens, right? So with trade policy, we started a low tariff policy, and that started being successful. And so then the thing was like, well, we'll just continue that.
Right.
And continue it and continue it. And it was never sort of reevaluated when other parties were sort of, taking advantage of it or the playing field had changed. Look,
right.
This is not the same thing as when we started this policy. We need to reevaluate it. Now, blanket tariffs, saying tariffs like Trump does is a good way to frighten countries that have strong economic need to sell their products to the United States.
Right.
And could be a negotiating ploy. And again,
probably
and he loves to negotiate from strength, and I think that's one of the things. But he has shown he's not just all hat, no.
Sure.
Right? So he's willing to back it up. He put in tariffs before, and he says he's willing to do that. And so when it disrupts it. So rather than the sort of status quo or the given, hey, everybody just assumes the U.S. is going to have zero or very low tariffs. Mm-hmm. So let's just plan on that. Now it's like, okay, now we need to reevaluate it. And that reevaluation, for good, better or worse, needs to happen every so often. I think we need a disruptive president every 50 years or so.
Yeah.
Truman was one of that to disrupt things. And it's kind of important that disruptive president be a jerk.
Yeah, he was a jerk. Truman was a jerk.
You have to kind of be a jerk, and you have to be off-putting to people because you're questioning long-held sort of assumptions.
Right.
Right. And so the assumption has always been tariffs. Things like, look, I don't want you to assume that anymore. You have that. There has to be a good benefit for why I'm not giving you a tariff.
Now, what if my objection is a principled one? What if I have the fundamental assumption that I have a right to property, mm-hmm. and that right to property extends to consume items wherever I deem appropriate, mm-hmm. and tariffs is a way of disrupting my right to property?
That is ideologically that's a strong argument. I'm not gonna disagree with that. But trade with other countries is a political thing because we have to give them money when those goods come into the country, not just when they come to you.
Yeah.
And the exchange between those countries has to be such. And I mean, there are tariffs on, and it's part of being a good trade partner. Not necessarily is, or what he talks about is if Europe, especially, if we don't tariff something coming from Europe, but they're tariffing us.
Right.
Right. And it's a little bit like, yes, look, we'd rather not have these tariffs, but why are you punishing us? And so they've sort of already started a trade war, and we're just choosing to lose it.
Right.
And so he's just sort of saying, look, maybe that he would regard, look, I'd rather have no tariffs, but they've started this trade war, and I'm going to fight it.
Yeah.
And hopefully get it down, and then we can go back to no tariffs. But as long as it's sort of equal, and that's generally sort of been the thing. When tariffs have usually always been sort of short-term things to negotiate between countries on a short-term basis, and then because there's an imbalance for a little while, and then they go away. Long-term sort of. Ideologically, we should always have a tariff. Right. I would sort of oppose that.
Right.
As very much as like we should never have tariffs because ideologically.
Also.
Right. I feel like both those points are kind of too extreme.
Yeah.
I think it's a tool. You can fall in love with it too much.
You think Trump is in love with it too much?
Afraid of it. Well, he's just talk right now.
Yeah.
But he used it. He denied. I don't think he overused it. And the thing why, right, is his tariffs against China were begrudgingly accepted as effective and that the Democrats were going to continue them.
Yeah,
right. And
I
they
did note that they did.
Right, they were like, Trump was right on China.
Yeah,
we hate saying it, right? But
they didn't say it, but
some of them
they did passively by continuing the trend.
There were like Schumer and others that were interviewed said, yes, no, this is we've found this to be wise policy that we're going to continue, right? Now, again, continuing something doesn't mean we continue it forever, right? We should at regular points reevaluate whether that needs to change or not, or based on things. But I would expect when prices go up or start spiking, we have inflation. When prices go up for whatever reason, usually a drop in supply, and people refuse to reduce their consumption.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, of course, right.
So,
now, I'll be the first one to admit that being able to sacrifice is a forgotten art in America. And I mean, as a former financial consultant, I mean, as a former financial consultant, that was far and away the biggest problem I ran into. Just I literally, there was not a single person in the 300 some odd households that I, consulted with over my years, not a single person, not one, where I wasn't able to immediately be like, oh, you need to just stop eating out fast food 18 meals a week, or, oh, you need to stop consuming 7 bottles of alcohol every month, or, oh, maybe stop smoking 2 pounds of weed literally not a single household didn't have not even just an oversight, but like a glaring, gaping hole of loss,
unwise consumption,
unwise consumption, right? Not because they, and it was always, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people can quit smoking cigarettes or something on the drop of a dime, but
they're an inelastic market.
but over time, it's like these things, nobody had that ability to sacrifice. But that having been said, I mean, I think to a certain extent, it's our legislature and our president's job to create an environment in which we can engage in commerce in a normal fashion without too much trouble. And I think tariffs is one way to stagnate it if they use it incorrectly.
It's true.
I think it's a very fine line. I think you might be underplaying how difficult it is to do it well. Because I think it's probably like one of those things where you have to be a master, or it doesn't go out right, it doesn't come out right. I think it's probably
you have to be in a very strong position of power, I think, to get it. We'll see.
That isn't to say that Trump can't do it, but it's because one of the troubles that I have with Trump, one of my many problems, is that it's like you said, he's all talk right now, and it's all a game of getting himself to a psychological position of strength, and then this and what he actually intends to implement could be wildly different from the words that he uses when he comes.
Once they get in the negotiations and they see the costs aren't worth the benefit.
Right.
Right. And you'd hope, and that's what I think. He talked about the wall, and while he was building the wall, he was talking about we're going to put slap tariffs and make Mexico pay for it. When they looked at it, ultimately he wasn't able to do that. Right. So yes, there's campaign talk you've got to see through a little bit. I just don't think we should be ad hoc. Tariffs are always bad, but it's really easy. At least he's talked about openly, honestly, about something he would do that will have winners and losers. These are the type of policies that politicians rarely, right? Kamala could be like, oh yeah, tariffs like even worse than Trump, but she's keeping her mouth shut.
Right.
Because, that would, as soon as you start talking about raising prices, you can bring up people whose lives would be hurt by those higher prices.
Right.
And exploit that, And so people are less inclined to be specific about their policies.
Yeah.
I think he's just proven, because Trump's been president before, I think he has proven at least to listen to some economic advisors and things like that. He'll say whatever he wants. I can't defend what else says. But he's governed like an adult. And his use of tariffs was not inappropriate during his administration. And so I think that's something he'd like to do away with the ad hoc or status quo current tariff position and have everybody reevaluate it and hopefully have a level playing field. Maybe he could end some of the wars that have been started that we just haven't been fighting.
Okay. Well, I'm not sold 100%, but yeah, it's thoughts, food for thought. So, what do you guys think? Let me know in your comments, and catch you next time on Comment Mansplaining.